President Biden is expected to make a decision on student loans by the end of August. At least that's what he said last week. On the table is whether he'll keep the repayment moratorium in place or cancel student loan debt for some altogether. Biden extended the moratorium back in April, but many don't feel it has gone far enough to relieve borrowers.
Many, including Briahna Joy Gray.
I'm many.
You are the many.
Look, we've talked about this on the podcast, on the show. Sorry, podcast brain. We've talked about this on the show a lot, and my stance on this is pretty clear. But regardless of what you substantively feel as an individual about student debt, there can be no arguing with the fact that Biden has the authority to do this by executive order, and that he promised during the campaign through 2020 full debt forgiveness for people who attended public colleges and for all students who attended historically black colleges and universities. So we're looking at poll numbers where only 31% of Democrats want him to even run again. He's violated campaign promise after campaign promise, starting with the checks that a lot of people still haven't forgotten. And now he's violated this enormous promise at the same time that Trump is the guy who started the moratorium and Biden is poised to be the guy who ended the moratorium.
And it's pretty funny.
Now, if you like, even if you don't want to cancel student debt, if it were me politically, not that anybody's taking my advice, I would not be the one who stops it. Because to be honest, the moratorium infers more of a financial benefit on more people than a $10,000 loan cancellation will, to be honest. So if you have any kind of size of debt burden, the average debt of an American student is something like $35,000 a year total. But many people obviously have 50, 100, six-figure debt, especially people who went to grad school. $10,000 a year is less than one year of interest, right? So if the fact that these things have been postponed over the last 2 years means a lot of folks have been able to save and actually pay down the principal of their debt. The real harm of these student debt payments is that many of us are at 7-8% interest rates. So you just can't catch up. This myth that we're just not paying, we're just not working, we have dumb jobs and it's our fault for getting art history degrees or something. That's not what's going on. The problem is that people are paying and it's like, droplets in the ocean. So if it were me, I would say, Biden, just extend the moratorium. If anything, you should promise, hey, vote for me, vote for Democrats, because we're going to keep this moratorium extended and you don't know what the Republicans are going to do. Instead of reminding everybody about all your broken promises by both ending the moratorium and then throwing pennies at the crowd.
Is the goal, you think, to do this, if they're looking at August, I think they said, give somebody in the coalition a reason to actually show up and vote Dem with some kind of reward for doing so right before the midterms?
That does not sound like a smart plan to me, if that is the plan. Because here's the thing, he is looking poised to renege. He has been not very confident about even the $10,000 promise. And even the $10,000 is caveated enormously. So what that means is turning on the spigot there are, I believe, 44 million debtors in America. 44 million student debtors. You're turning on the spigot not just for these young people, but for seniors who are the fastest growing group of people with student debt obligations, people who are having their Social Security checks garnished for student debt at a time when we are in a not quite technical recession. And obviously people are really hurting because of gas prices, food prices, and the like. Many families have only been able to sustain. These aren't kids, mind you. These are people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s with families. They've been able to sustain because for the last 2 years they haven't been required to pay the extra $200, $300, $400, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 in student loans on top of their sky-high rents and everything else that's going on in the country.
We have to do something to fix the system.
I agree.
If we're creating more people who are in this arrangement every year, who are debtors for a process that is not worth it, that is not yield much of it. Maybe it does in specific cases for some of these degrees cost a lot of money, but then you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, something. It's not true for a lot of them. You said the line about the art history people. That is some of the people.
Yeah, I mean, I have an art history degree. I also have a law degree. But look here, I hear your point, and that's why on the Bernie campaign, we're not naive to that. The reality was the government is spending and backing all of these loans. These are federally backed loans, right? That's why Biden has the ability to cancel the student loan debt.
It's a
But instead of spending all of that money, instead of trying to pass this money through the banking industry, which then profits off of our interest payments at the expense of America's students, which we have as a country an investment in, it could simply fund public colleges. And then everyone who goes to a public college, a private college rather, you're on your own, you made your bed. But the fact that us having a robust, high quality public education system will bring down the competition in private colleges as well. And it is in fact the guaranteed federally backed loans that drove up the prices of tuition at all these institutions in the first instance.
No, I agree. Absolutely. There's no question. You subsidize something, you get more of it. You confused people. The whole system is confused about what the actual price of education is, and then it's not correlated to the value of it whatsoever.
That's true.
But people don't know what they're paid because it's paid for. The government helps you pay for it on the front end. And then, get the degree, have your fun. And then later, we'll talk about you paying it back. And then later comes and like, wait, what? What do I owe?
There has been a bait and switch. There's been a real misrepresentation.
Meanwhile, the colleges, if the government's going to help you pay it on the front end, the price can be as high as they want it to be because you're not paying it then.
Right. And, they're happy to, the schools obviously are happy to take the money because they know it's federally backed. They're guaranteed. No other institution would give these 18-year-olds a loan and say, you're probably going to pay it off. No, these are perverse incentives.
So it's price disguise, it's perverse incentives.
So, what I would say and remind people is that we used to live in a country where we didn't have the expectation that you would have free kindergarten through high school either. Mm-hmm. And we understood at a certain point that to compete on a national stage and for people to have a legitimate chance in the job market, you had to provide for your citizenry to have these kinds of basic skills. Like it or not, we live in a world today where people also have to have some. It's very advantageous to have some education after high school, whether it's vocational school or these. I
don't know if I agree with that.
These kinds of colleges.
Well, that's certainly true, but we have incentivized that because we have created this system where you do need to jump through additional hoops to be considered a productive member of society in the labor market.
You learn things in college and vocational
I actually
school.
don't. Well, maybe in vocational school. A lot of what people learn in college is clearly not valuable because they forget most of it.
Robby,
if you read Academically Adrift, the level of retention of actual knowledge of the average person who goes through college is virtually non-existent.
It's not about what you retain. The point of going to college is not being able to recite, Plato back at people when you get to your 9 to 5. The point is that you're learning.
Then why do you spend 4 years reading Plato? I mean, that is what most of it is.
Robby, you're learning the critical reading skills and analytical skills to enable you to sit here and do this job. I don't know about you, but when I was 18 years old, I would not have been able to be as effective as a journalist, as a podcaster, as a political analyst.
You know how I learned to be a journalist?
At 18.
Working at the newspaper.
Yeah, I think
in college, sure.
I think
but it wasn't any of my classes.
Robby,
it wasn't
college.
any of my. It was essentially an apprenticeship.
Yeah, look,
that's what worked.
And we're talking about vocational education here as well. So if you want to talk about whether or not college is as geared toward your long-term professional goals in America as it could be, restructuring the kinds of things we learn in school, shortening the amount of time you have to spend in a lot of grad programs. There's a whole discourse in the legal community about whether you need 3 years of law school versus 2, and people have the same conversations in other disciplines. I think those are perfectly legitimate conversations to have. But I don't think when you look around the world and see the competition and see how much better people's primary education is than ours, not to mention their advanced education, to say, we should just throw everybody to the wolves and people don't need to be informed about how to live our lives and make our society better. We absolutely need vocational training and other kinds of training. And I would like to point out that under Bernie's model of student debt cancellation, it absolutely applied to people who had student debt from trade school, which really doesn't get discussed nearly often enough. To get a license to be a trucker or to do a lot of these vocations, it's extremely expensive. And a lot of these programs are predatory, and they prey on the idea that people think they're doing the right thing. I'm going to train to be, have this vocation, and there's a lot of for-profit commercials and luring people in from lower income groups into these programs, and then they're saddled with a whole lot of debt, and they don't necessarily get the.
Well, I bet there's some kind of vast and extensive licensing regime that forces you to do something like that.
So, in the context of the student debt conversation, I wish we would broaden it up, and I wish that reporters who have access to the president and his staff, have more pointed critiques of why they haven't done what they promised, including to the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, whose name for some reason never gets brought up in these conversations. So
yeah, he's kind of a low-level, a behind-the-scenes kind of operator right now. But,
that seems like a choice. This seems to me that one of the most popular policy platforms out there, and one of the things that is riling to so many Americans is the student debt issue. Reminder, this is 44 million Americans. We're getting emails about this. We're getting like constant reminders that this thing is starting up and this is a real impact on our lives. This is a crucial election time issue, and you have to be incredibly out of touch, have kids that never had student debt in your entire life, to think that this is just a nothing burger of an issue. You think gas prices are bad? Wait until you start having to pay back $1,000 a month to your student loans.
Don't do it. No one do it. Don't go into debt to go to college. Not worth it. Never worth it. Don't do it. All right, more Rising right after this.